There we go.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Two Beards and a Bible. This is Dave Tenney.
And this is John Smino.
And we are somewhere in the book of Acts chapter 23. Right?
Oh, we're in verse 11, yes.
Of chapter 23.
And I think it's your turn to read.
It would be.
And last week we had talked about the great dissension that happened between the Pharisees and the Sadducees when Paul spoke to them.
Yep, they were trying to kill him.
So why don't you read to verse 22?
Okay. So starting at verse 11, it says, "But the following night the Lord stood by him and said, 'Be of good cheer, Paul, for as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must also bear witness in Rome.' And when it was day, some of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under an oath, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. Now there were more than 40 who had formed this conspiracy. They came to the chief priests and elders and said, 'We have bound ourselves under a great oath, that we will eat nothing until we have killed Paul. Now you, therefore, together with the council, suggest to the commander that he be brought down to you tomorrow, as though you were going to make further inquiries concerning him. But we are ready to kill him before he comes near.' So when Paul's sister's son heard of their ambush, he went and entered the barracks and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions to him and said, 'Take this young man to the commander, for he has something to tell him.' So he took him and brought him to the commander and said, 'Paul, the prisoner, called me to him and asked me to bring this young man to you. He has something to say to you.' Then the commander took him by the hand, went aside, and asked privately, 'What is it that you have to tell me?' And he said, 'The Jews have agreed to ask that you bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire more fully about him. But do not yield to them, for more than 40 of them lie in wait for him, men who have bound themselves by an oath that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, waiting for the promise from you.' So the commander let the young man depart and commanded him, 'Tell no one that you have revealed these things to me.'"
You know, it's a good thing that these guys took this oath, because then they all died, right?
Right. I wondered that as I was reading. Do we find that they
starved to death?
Right. And it just reminds me of children. You know, well, I'm just not going on a hunger strike. I'm just not going to eat.
Well, go for it.
Right.
That's more gravy for me.
Yeah, it's astounding. And then the other thing that crossed my mind just now as I was reading this is, do they not even think about the 10 Commandments?
Thou shalt not
murder.
Yes.
I mean, they're just, and then this group that formed this conspiracy, they go to the high priest and tell him they're going to do this, and he doesn't say, "Oh, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
That would be against the law."
Right.
I mean, it's
stupid.
Makes you shake your head.
Yeah. And it's just more and more proof that the Jewish leadership had totally abandoned God's law.
Right.
There was, and that had probably been that way for a long time.
It was true then. It's written in the scriptures, and it's true now that many will come, but few will enter. And this really shakes it down when you think about it.
Yep.
You know, the popular religious world, whether it be of the Jews at this time or whether it be the religious world today, there are those that are in it for reasons other than being true to God's word. Mm-hmm. They're in it for, things that bolster themselves, either their pocketbook or their image or both. And it really, when you think about it, think of how few people are really, even within the Lord's church, as we know it. Not all the people that show up to the Lord's church every Sunday morning are going to make it, and we know that to be true from the scriptures, and that's just human nature, And it was true then, it's true now, and you can really see that in this example.
Yeah. I mean, and obviously for us today, it requires, faith is is the cornerstone of all of these things, and and there are some who do not have faith, and that's That's a tough thing. Sometimes people are just going because, they feel like they're expected to go, but they really don't have faith that.
The more time I have on this earth, the more that I read and study, the more I really start to come to a better understanding of faith. And I don't know that I can put it into words, but it's a lot more than I believe in Jesus.
Right.
It's
trust.
It's a trust and a comfort that comes from having that hope
Yeah.
that you have through the scriptures. And it's only strengthened when you put your nose in the scriptures and study. I think that you and I, and it's been said by many people, that nobody learns more than the preacher or the person giving the lesson.
Yep.
And I've found that to be true, and it's been something that has really changed my view on this idea of faith.
Yeah.
It's a lot more. It's a lot deeper than the superficial thing that
It is.
that is purported in the religious world.
Yeah. There's certainly a trust. To me, like the thing that makes it real is this trust.
Right.
In fact, you put your trust in God.
And when you go through trials like Paul has,
Yes.
and things are mentioned that you think again it's going to be the end of the world. He was saying goodbye to people, understanding in his own mind that this would be the last time that he would see them. And he even said, his heart was breaking, or why are you making my heart break?
Yeah.
When he was leaving that one group, and even there we see the way that the Lord's will followed through, no matter how many people at this point anyways that were trying to kill him. The Lord's will was going to be done, and that's something we can put our faith in and our hope that the Lord's will is going to be done.
Yeah.
And there's really nothing for us to worry about.
Right. There's nothing.
Superficially.
Right. Exactly. Absolutely. So at the beginning here, Jesus appears. It says that the Lord stood by him. In my Bible, it's in red. How about yours?
Yeah. Yes.
It's in red.
Be of good cheer.
Yeah. So Jesus appears to Paul and encourages him. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think we all need that. And when we read the Bible, basically we can have Jesus encouraging us today, right?
Right.
And then we find out here also that Paul has a sister. Mm-hmm. See, we don't really hear a lot about Paul's family, but he has a sister and a nephew. Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't say whether or not they're Christians, but there's probably a pretty good chance they are.
Right. Yeah, we don't know for sure, but knowing the ferocious nature of Paul's teaching and preaching, you would imagine so.
Yeah, and I imagine they're still concerned with his life because this young man who went to the Roman commander to tell him this was probably putting his own life in peril by doing this.
Right.
Because a lot of times, I've never been involved in a plot to murder somebody.
Right.
But I imagine the tensions are high.
Right. And I guess we don't know from this how old that boy was.
No.
But seeing as how the the commander led the young man by the hand.
Yeah.
He does call him a young man.
Yeah. So he
verse
could have been
22.
13, 14.
Yeah, who knows? But it was probably not a full-grown person.
Yeah. And probably a good person maybe to go. Who knows?
And that might have lent to the seriousness that was taken with that situation, because it was coming from the mouth of someone who probably didn't have an agenda.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So the commander obviously believes that this is going to happen, and he tells him to don't tell anyone.
Right.
Because he doesn't want anybody to know. Now, I would imagine the way he found out is 40 people can't keep a secret.
Right.
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 If you got 40 guys that took an oath, some of them are bragging about it.
Right.
And that's, I'm sure, how it was made known.
And they probably didn't know who he was, that he had a connection.
Right. Yeah. So now we're going to find this guy's going to write a letter. So I'll go ahead and read to the end of the chapter here. Starting in verse 23, it says, "And he called for 2 centurions, saying, prepare 200 soldiers." Now we know how many how many soldiers are in a century, right?
Yeah.
2 centurions saying, "Prepare 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night," which would be 3 a.m., "and provide mounts to set Paul on and bring him safely to Felix the governor. He wrote a letter in the following manner: Claudius Lysias." Now, in this Roman letter form, that's this commander's name. So now we find out who this commander is. "Claudius Lysias, to the most excellent governor Felix, greetings." He says, "This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them. Coming with the troops, I rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman. And when I wanted to know the reason they accused him, I brought him before their council. I found out that he was accused concerning questions of their law, but had nothing charged against him deserving of death or chains. And when it was told me that the Jews lay in wait for the man, I sent him immediately to you, and also commanded his accusers to state before you the charges against him. Farewell." Then the soldiers, as they were commanded, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. The next day they left the horsemen to go on with him and return to the barracks. And when they came to Caesarea and had delivered the letter to the governor, they also presented Paul to him. And when the governor had read it, he asked what province he was from. And when he understood that he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will hear you when your accusers have also come." And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's praetorium, which I'm not sure what that is.
Right. I might have a note about
Do you have a note about that?
I might. Let's see.
I don't know what the word praetorium means.
Yeah,
I'm going to look that up in the Google.
good. It's in my brain, but I can't bring it out.
Praetorium, an official residence of an ancient Roman governor. That's kind of what I thought it was.
There you go.
So obviously they must have had some sort of jail or something, dungeon or something in Herod's house that Paul could be kept in.
I don't know. I mean, maybe that means that he was kept in good comfort.
Yeah, he could have been.
Because, I mean, that would kind of line up with the protection that kind of followed Paul throughout the rest of his journey.
I mean, it seems like he's not really accused of anything serious at all.
Right. And even when they have him under, in their control, they still let people come in and help him. And then at one point, they even allow him to go out to his friends and so on. So he has great freedom there. It's not really like... It doesn't read to me like he's in jail.
You know, when Felix read this, he was like,
right?
His Jewish leaders are driving me crazy.
Right.
And that's kind of, that's what led up to Rome. We talk about, the destruction of Jerusalem, which happened in AD 70, but they were asking for it the whole time. They're, for the, 50 years preceding this.
Right.
That's what they were asking for.
Right.
So it's no surprise when Rome finally says, you know what, we've had enough of this.
When you, even in a city today, so there would be certain cities in our country that just seem to always have more trouble than others. There are certain houses within a city. I know this for a fact that the police in my hometown had a list of houses that they'd been to a whole bunch.
Oh, I'm sure.
And, I've known landlords that have been contacted by the police, and they're saying, you know what? We've been called to this house that you own, 37 times in the last 2 months, and we want you to maybe do something about that.
Yes. I lived next to one of those houses in Wadsworth, and I forget, something had happened, and I went down to the police station. And it wasn't with that house. It was something else. And I said where I lived, and the officer at the police station goes, "Oh, you mean beside Stephanie's house?" I said, "Yes." They knew exactly where I lived.
And in that particular kind of situation, it's not good to be on a first name basis with the police.
They were on first name basis with my neighbor, and they were over there quite a bit, which was entertaining sometimes. But,
Right.
you know.
But no doubt, the Jews were causing great turmoil, and I'm sure a thorn in the side of the Roman leadership.
Absolutely. So he writes this letter, and I like it. He kind of puts himself in a good light because he says, coming with the troops, I rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman, which is true.
Right.
But that's not exactly. He's left out some details there.
Politics.
Yeah, it's politics for sure. So the soldiers go ahead and they take him and they bring him over to Felix. And Felix says, "All right, well, when your accusers get here, we're going to have us a trial." Mm-hmm. So that's basically.
We have these names too. One of the thoughts, and I didn't go back and look these names up, but I would imagine that you could go back through the Roman records and find Claudius Lysias and find out that was an actual person.
There is some stuff on there's like a Wikipedia page on this person.
Okay.
So I mean it's
got to be true.
Yeah. Yeah. It's on Wikipedia. It's got to that's the God's honest truth on there. Yes. No.
But certainly, that's another thing to remember here is there is some details in here that when you read through it and you're like, well, why would I care about that? Perhaps you've thought that, but when you think about it, it's there for a reason. God's word is written in such a way that it can be confirmed.
Oh yeah,
and that it there's no extraneous material here.
Yeah, I mean I have a hobbyist interest in Roman history, but it's only because of the Bible, and especially the New Testament, because there's so much Roman stuff in here that it helps to try to understand that culture and their laws and how things worked. It just helps. You don't need to know that, but it does. It kind of, at least for me, it helps me get it more straight in my head.
Yeah,
why certain things were done a certain way.
That's something I haven't spent a lot of time on. But when we come across these situations numerous times throughout our time studying together, you'll interject some of this history.
Yeah,
that you've studied, and it really does help tie things together. I found it to be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to do it, and it's interesting. At least it is to me. Yeah. Some people really just despise history, but
in high school, I really didn't care much about history.
Yeah,
the history teacher was the football coach, and that probably lent to the idea that it wasn't taught with very much fervor. Yes, yeah. But now that I've put a little history behind me, I have a much greater interest in it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so now to chapter 24. We're in the last 4 chapters here. You want to read to verse 9.
All right, chapter 24, verse 1. Now after 5 days, Ananias, the high priest, came down with the elders and a certain orator named Tertullus. These gave evidence to the governor against Paul. And when he was called upon, Tertullus began his accusation, saying, "Seeing that through you we enjoy great peace and prosperity is being brought to this nation by your foresight, we accept it always and in all places, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness. Nevertheless, not to be tedious to you any further, I beg you to hear by your courtesy a few words from us. For we have found this man a plague, a creator of dissension among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He even tried to profane the temple, and we seized him, and wanted to judge him according to our law. But the commander Lysias came by, and with great violence took him out of our hands, commanding his accusers to come to you. By examining him yourself, you may ascertain all these things of which we accuse him." And the Jews also assented, maintaining that these things were so.
Wow. So we're stopped there.
All right.
So he's laying it on thick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's certainly trying to gain favor of Felix.
Yeah. 407. I mean, it's a
Buttering him up.
yeah. One of my favorite movies of all time, John, is The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And at the end of that, like towards the end of that movie, there's this scene where there's this politician who's going to give this speech, and he gives this long flowery thing and about all these words that he's prepared, and he throws his speech on the floor, and somebody picks a speech up, and it's just a blank piece of paper. But this guy it says he was an orator. Mm-hmm. So the Jews are trying to stack they've hired a professional.
Right. And it rings of, politics today.
Yes.
Those that, we can probably, we won't get into a political discussion, but we can think of people who were put into offices in a high place because of their ability to speak well.
Oh yeah.
Even if the things coming out of their mouth didn't make sense, which was the case
here.
Yeah. It is, as we read on, we'll find out that was the case here.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, you could make a huge list of politicians that in our country that are just like this guy.
Yeah.
So the things he starts off his speech, and all he's doing is like he's trying to butter up Felix. Mm-hmm. He talks about that they enjoy this great peace and prosperity, and it's your foresight and all. I mean, Felix has to know that what's being done here.
Yeah.
He's not stupid.
Right. Well, and even I stumbled through some of the language there in this oration.
Like singing, that's a hard thing to say.
Yeah. And it some of it didn't flow. People just don't talk that way.
Yes, no.
And I'm told, I've been told before, as preachers, we hear people say things and we hear other preachers, and so we borrow phrases from time to time, and so there's a good sister that has told me before. She's like, there's like this preacher speak, and you don't need to do that. Just talk normal. Yeah, and that's some good advice. And and it in this particular situation, all this buttering up and these flowery words, if you're paying attention, you can see right through it. Yeah. And as you said, this person being spoken to, very likely saw right through it.
And one man told me one time, he gave me some advice about preaching, and he said, just act like you're just talking to one person. Yeah. He said, just try to talk like you were just talking to one person, because that's what you're doing. Right. You're just talking to one person.
Now, that's different than pointing out one person in the audience.
Well, that is.
Preaching straight at them.
But sometimes that needs done. Verse 10. So now Paul's going to make a defense, and I think that's probably all we're going to get through is this one last section. He says, Then Paul, after the governor had nodded to him to speak, answered, Inasmuch as I know that you have been for many years a judge of this nation, I do the more carefully answer for myself, because you may ascertain that it is no more than 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem to worship. And they neither found me in the temple disputing with anyone, nor inciting the crowd, either in the synagogues or in the city. Nor can they prove the things of which they now accuse me. But this I confess to you, that according to the way, which they call a sect, so I worship the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets. I have hope in God, which they themselves also accept, that there will be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust. This being so, I myself always strive to have a conscience without offense toward God and men. Now, after many years, I came to bring alms and offerings to my nation, in the midst of which some Jews from Asia found me purified in the temple, neither with mob nor with tumult. They ought to have been there before you to object if they had anything against me. Or else let those who hear themselves say that they found any wrongdoing in me and while I stood in the council. Unless it is for this one statement which I cried out, standing among them, concerning the resurrection of the dead, I am being judged by you this day. So we'll stop there. So the one thing Paul doesn't do is he doesn't try to butter up Felix.
Right.
Right? He says, this is the only thing that he says. He recognizes that he has been a judge of this nation for many years. And I'm going to carefully give an answer about myself.
Right.
That,
And he didn't go on the attack
no.
back at those that were after him.
No.
You know, they called him some pretty bad things.
Yeah.
You know, and what did they call him? The creator of dissension.
Yes.
He tried to profane the temple. You know, they were calling him some pretty awful things, and there just wasn't any proof of those things because it just wasn't true. And the dissension that they accuse him of came from within themselves.
Yes.
You know, all he did was speak of the truth in the word.
Yeah.
And they got angry about it.
Yeah.
So they're accusing him of things that they themselves are doing.
And he points out that the thing they were upset was that he talked about this resurrection of the dead. And he said that twice because he says, I have hope in God, which they themselves also accept that there will be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust. That's the thing he's pointing out, because he points it out twice, that's what they're having a problem with.
And thinking back to, you know, the Old Testament scriptures and so on, you know, where was it that the dead would go after they left this earth? They would, you know, the faithful would go to Abraham's bosom.
Right.
You know, so I mean, that was not a strange idea. The fact that they disputed that still just...
Yeah. But the Sadducees didn't believe in those things.
Yeah.
Well, John, let's read to the end of the chapters here so we can kind of continue with this narrative.
At verse 22.
Yeah.
But when Felix heard these things, having more accurate knowledge of the way, he adjourned the proceedings and said, when Lysias, the commander, comes down, I will make a decision on your case. So he commanded the centurion to keep Paul and to let him have liberty, and told him not to forbid any of his friends to provide for or visit him. And after some days, when Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, he sent for Paul and heard him concerning the faith in Christ. Now as he reasoned about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and answered, go away for now. When I have a convenient time, I will call for you. Meanwhile, he also hoped that money would be given him by Paul, that he might release him. Therefore he sent for him more often and conversed with him. But after 2 years, Porcius Festus succeeded Felix, and Felix, wanting to do the Jews a favor, left Paul bound.
Okay. So go ahead.
You see the true nature of Felix.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. We said that, you know, we talk about that verse a lot where Felix said, you know, Felix became afraid. So whatever things Paul was talking to him about did cut him to the heart.
Yeah.
He was moved by that, but not enough.
Yeah, righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he started to get a little close to the heartstrings there.
Yeah, and it had an effect on him. Mm-hmm. But, you know, he was obviously a greedy feller.
Right.
But it says also that he sent for him often and talked to him. Isn't that interesting?
It is, and it reminds me of in the religious world today, we have those that I can think of in my mind, religious groups that will give people things in order to get them in the building to then talk to them.
Yeah.
And in reality, most of the time, people just come to get the thing you're given.
Yeah. Hey,
They're not listening.
You know, I had a neighbor, this was years ago, he had given me a chronological Bible. We used to talk about religious things. And his wife was leading some Bible study, and he kept wanting me to go to it. And I've said, you know, I don't feel comfortable going to a Bible study led by your wife personally. I mean, so he said, "Well, can I have my Bible back I gave you?" I said, "I guess."
That's interesting.
It was kind of funny. I mean, if he would have, I mean, it's just like I didn't know his wife. I didn't talk to his wife. I mean, I
Right.
wasn't even a Christian at this point.
Right.
But I just didn't know her. I knew him. I talked to him.
Right.
You know, if he wanted to do a Bible study, I probably would have done that with him. But
Right.
it was an odd thing.
But you can see that he was just hoping that someone would fill his pockets.
Yeah.
And he didn't care
Yeah.
one way or the other.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. So now we hear that Paul stayed here for a couple of years, and John, we better stop there.
All right. Well, we'll pick up next time in chapter 25. Thanks for joining in. We'll see you next time.